In the name of God, our Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer. Amen. I will never forget Election Day 2021, November. We had just moved to Falls Church a few days before. And on hearing the doorbell ring, I opened the door to find a young mum with her two daughters standing on our step, holding out the gift of a warm, fragrant lemon cake, freshly out of the oven. Kate was sorry that we had moved in next door in the middle of torrential rain, and she brought the cake as a practical welcome gift to show she cared. That election day, my neighbor had no clue who I was voting for, but our political affiliation was irrelevant. She just wanted to show mercy and grace to her neighbors who had just moved in. Well, today I will explore the theme of loving our neighbors in the story Jesus tells of the Good Samaritan, and I will link it with our Old Testament reading of Amos 7. If you've never read the prophet Amos, I encourage you when you get home to read the chapters. It's a short book. But it will give us an insight into God's values, and it's relevant still to our nation today. Both the Hebrew, or rather what strikes me in the Good Samaritan parable and Amos, for me, is the emphasis on the human body. Both the Hebrew scriptures and the New Testament assert that God created us as one whole human being, which is very good. Our body, our mind, and our spirit as one. And this contrasts with the ancient Greek view that our spirits are good, while our material body is deemed inferior and disposable. As Episcopalians, we emphasize the incarnation, that God intentionally sent his only beloved Son, Jesus Christ, down to earth as a flesh and blood human being, born of Mary as a baby. Jesus ministered while he was on earth, healing our broken bodies and our minds. And he died on the cross so that we could die to sin and be raised with new and eternal and recognizable resurrection bodies. So how we treat our own and others' bodies here on earth matters. How we reach out to, provide for, and heal in practical ways the bodies of children, women, and all people of every race, religion, and gender right now matters to God. Today, for example, after the communion part of our service, we offer healing prayer in the chapel for those who are suffering. Well, God asks an uneducated layperson, a shepherd called Amos in the 8th century BC, what he sees. For prophets are seers of God, first and foremost. And Amos says he sees a plumb line. A plumb line, a simple but necessary tool used in construction, which ensures that the wall that is built will be upright, strong, and enduring. In the first 6 chapters, Amos examines Israelite society and the prosperity they enjoy, which has led to gross iniquities. Yes, I meant inequities, but actually it's also iniquities. Inequities between urban elites and the poor. One commentator states that it's through manipulation of debt and credit that wealthy landowners amassed capital and estates at the expense of small farmers. In our own country, we are familiar with this situation since so much of our wealth was built on the backs of African slaves. God, first of all, in Amos, condemns the violent crimes of the Gentile nations who have physically harmed God's people of Israel. But God then goes on to abhor the exploitation and oppression by wealthy Israelites of their fellow Jews. The rich live a life of conspicuous luxury, while the poor go hungry. The physically needy are sold for a pair of sandals, and the head of the poor are trampled in the dust. So God sets a plumb line in the midst of God's people of what mercy, compassion, and justice look like. God has repeatedly warned his people about what will happen to them if they ignore God's demands for fair and equitable dealings. They think they're safe because of their beautiful liturgy in the temple, their frequent animal and grain sacrifices. But God tells them that these will never make up for their lack of social action to minister to the bodies of their suffering compatriots. The Israelites are looking forward to the day of the Lord when God had promised that he would intervene. But God states that instead this day of the Lord will bring judgment on them. And this was fulfilled in the northern kingdom of Israel when they were conquered and deported to Assyria in 722 BC. Foreign migrants would be brought into Israel to intermarry with the few poor Israelites left. And these mixed race people are the Samaritans, despised and rejected by the pure Jewish people. So it's in this context that Jesus tells the story of the Good Samaritan in Luke 10. And in this Good Samaritan, Jesus is setting up a plumb line to show the true measure of neighborly relationships for those who claim to love God and their neighbor. Sadly, the professional religious people dismally fail the test of upright behavior to one of their own. And instead, it's a despised layman, a foreigner, an enemy whose actions are approved, the Good Samaritan. On seeing the beaten man, the Good Samaritan draws near to him, risking his own life on this dangerous stretch of road. He does not avert his eyes or hurry along his busy way. He is moved with compassion and therefore takes a series of concrete actions to minister to the man's bloody and bruised body. The Good Samaritan generously gives the gift of time, focused medical attention, transport of his own to safe lodging, food and money to ensure that the wounded man's body recovers. He says he'll check back with the innkeeper to make sure that the man has what he needs and that he will bear the cost of any further treatment the man needs. Well, this story of the Good Samaritan in Luke 10 is amazing, considering that in Luke 9, Jesus' disciples want to nuke the Samaritans, who reject them because Jesus is heading on his way to Jerusalem, and Jesus forbids such violence. So we can only imagine the shock of a Samaritan being portrayed as the true hero in Jesus' story. And Jesus turns the lawyer's question about who is his neighbor back on him. Don't judge others by excluding those who you do not deem worthy of your mercy. No, judge yourself. Are you showing kindness in your concrete actions to physically help others? Isn't it true that when we point one finger at someone else, there are 3 fingers pointing back at us? Well, Dr. Amy Jill Levine, a Jewish New Testament professor, says that for her, the shocking equivalent of the Good Samaritan hero today would be the good Hamas Palestinian, a feared and hated enemy. And I wonder whether in today's divisive American political climate, it might be the good Proud Boy or the good immigrant. Whoever it is that you strongly disagree with, who gives such generous and self-sacrificial help to his enemy. A moving story is told in a commentary of a 12-year-old Palestinian boy, Ahmad Khatib, who was shot and killed by Israeli soldiers in the West Bank while holding a toy gun. He was taken to an Israeli hospital and died 2 days later. And his parents made the decision to allow his organs to be harvested for transplant for Israelis. 6 people received his heart, his lungs, his kidneys, including a 2-month infant. And his mother, Abla, said, "My son has died. Maybe he can give life to others." Well, in modern life, many of us just want to be left alone to live our lives as we please, journeying along the road. But God and the church will not leave us alone. God has put his only Son, Jesus, into our midst as the plumb line by which we will be judged as a society. Like the Good Samaritan in the story, Jesus gives his life to the very end, to set us, his enemies, free from all that would bind us, body, mind, and spirit, so that we might know God's love and God's provision for our whole selves. So where then, this week, this month and year, is God inviting us to take concrete steps as individuals, as a church, and as a nation, to put our faith into embodied action for those who are beaten up and left on the side of the road to die? What can we give spiritually and materially in time, talent, and treasure in large and small ways, as my neighbor Kate did? And how can we today make racial, economic, social, and environmental justice roll down like waters and righteousness as a mighty stream, as Amos chapter 5 says? Won't you be, please won't you be my neighbor? Amen.